spinny circle, right? The spinny
Oh,
circle. The
yeah.
spinny circle is done, and it's on.
We're live.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Let's Chat Live. I am your host for today, Dwight Hurst. You can also call me D, but I am here today with Bernard. Welcome, Bernard.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here.
Oh, it's great. It's great to have you. Chris Revel, who was going to come on today, has to beg off, and he said basically he doesn't care about the fans enough to be here. Were those his words exactly?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, they can, go and boil themselves.
No, one thing that Chris and I have in common is we both, in our other jobs, we work with mental health, right? And so when Chris gets a little bit of a call to say you got to be available, he's got to be available.
Yeah, he's got to be available. Yeah.
So that's where he is. But we'll edit that part out so it sounds just like the bad things I say about him are there. So those of you that are live, you get to hear the truth. So I'm really excited to get to learn about you, Bernard. I'm excited by how many guitars you have up behind you, and maybe we'll get into that.
Yeah. Okay.
First of all, tell us where in the world are you? Because I happen to know, and people might think it's interesting.
Well, I'm in the Netherlands. It's in a town called Haarlem, and for those people who live in New York, might recognize the name. Haarlem is the borough of New York is named after this city.
Oh, okay.
It's about 20 miles west of Amsterdam.
Oh.
And for people who live in America, that's like somewhere in Europe.
Okay. Yes, exactly. You got us pegged pretty well there.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because in the Netherlands, I come from the UK. I'm British.
Uh-huh.
But in the Netherlands, it's very. I think it's about 400 kilometers, so it's like 300 miles from north to south. And
Gotcha.
People in the Netherlands think that's a really long way. And I know that in America, that's like just going down to the shops. How far is it? Oh, it's about 200 miles away, So the concept of distance in the Netherlands is a lot different to the American concept of distance.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, and it is different, isn't it? Like you say, there is just a lack of knowledge that we have about those things. I think people have heard of it, as dumb as this may be, when people hear about Amsterdam in America, they think party time, right? Yeah. They think free drugs.
Pulp Fiction has a lot to answer for.
That's right. Is that an annoying source, that kind of stuff, that kind of reputation?
Not for me, because I'm British and I don't really care.
Right. You don't care, right?
I don't care. I don't identify with, but it's not completely correct. But a lot of people do come to Amsterdam because of the drugs, or let's say it's possible to get cannabis is more or less legal.
Okay.
So you can go to a coffee shop, and in the Netherlands, a coffee shop is a place where you go and buy marijuana, cannabis. It's not a place where you go and buy coffee.
Well, I flew here because the coffee's so good. Right. You don't have to. It's like when I knew somebody who went to a place like that, let's say for legalization, and it was somebody who was an old school, let's just say user of different materials. And he was kind of like trying to have this sly communication kind of thing. And he said the clerk at the establishment he was at is like, no, you just buy this, So, hey, maybe that'll go down now that we're legalizing it in the US more and more. So anyway, once again, welcome to our drug podcast here. Didn't mean to make it themed around that. Bernard's like, what the hell am I doing here?
Why am I talking about drugs? It's funny you should say that, because the first guest on my podcast immediately started talking about, I asked him a question about who he wanted to play at his funeral, and the first thing he said was, well, I was at this festival and I'd taken a couple of tabs of acid, and I'm like, okay.
So I definitely
we're going down that road, are we?
Yeah, no, I definitely didn't want to buck the stereotype of the American who immediately started talking about Amsterdam. But anyway, just to prove the point. But and then you say, interesting to be in a place. Let me ask you, how did what was it that brought you to Haarlem?
Well, what brought me to the Netherlands is my wife.
Right,
is Dutch.
Right.
So I've been over here for nearly 20 years. No, more than 20 years now. So I came over to be with my wife. So that's.
Do you hold a dual citizenship?
I actually have a triple citizenship.
Oh, okay.
I have a triple nationality because my father is Irish, or was Irish. He's so he was born in the Republic of Ireland. So I have an Irish passport and a British passport and now a Dutch passport. So I'm 2/3 European.
I'm always fascinated by how international and how comfortable with internationality, I guess. Once again, you might tell me this is all bogus and I'm wrong, but in Europe, the traveling back and forth and the exchange, I know that it's not like, I'm not totally naive, but it's very interesting to me as an American, where we just don't get that as much. We don't, we don't do it as much. It's not like anyone's fault.
Well, I don't know. I mean, the United States of America is actually a continental country, a continental state. So in fact, the going from the East Coast to the West Coast is probably the same as going from the far eastern parts of Europe, like say Poland or the Balkan states, to the very far west parts of Europe, like Spain, Portugal. Distance-wise, it's about the same. So if you think about crossing that continent in Europe, you cross a lot of different countries, and the languages are all different. In America, you have kind of more or less the same common language, but there, I guess if you go across the states, I've only been a couple of times. If you go across the United States, you're going pretty much through the similar types of cultural changes. I mean, I bet that upstate New York is a lot different to parts of the Midwest. Absolutely. Or Texas, or the West Coast. So yeah. In terms of the changes across that distance, probably similar to what they have in the United States.
It's a really good point, as you mentioned that. Yeah, it is, and we see that. It's just we think of it as drawn within state boundaries instead of national boundaries. It's interesting to look at it that way. So let's get in a little bit into talking about your podcast. Tell everybody, what's your podcast called, and what do y'all do?
The podcast is called Your New Favorite Song, and basically the premise is I am a musician. I have I'm also in a band, and I like music, and I thought, well, it'd be nice to, whenever I listen to a song, I hear a song and I like it, and I think, I wonder what's going on behind that song. As an artist, you also think, oh, what do they do? I hear something interesting in the song, I wonder what they did. And then I thought, well, hey, I could just reach out and ask, and reach out to people and say, hey, how did you write this song? Or what were you thinking about? Or what was going on in your mind? And what's the hidden details that are in there to try and help me improve my own songwriting. And it just is interesting to speak to other people who are creators. So the idea is I take a song that I like, and then I invite the people on who wrote the song or performed the song, and we talk more or less about that song. And that's the kind of the what's that, the kind of the red line that goes through the whole episode, and then we talk about from anything, all sorts of stuff.
That's really interesting. I had not heard of it till today when we were prepping this, so I haven't had a chance to listen to it yet, but I'm excited to listen to it. Let me. We have a comment from a listener. Jason Hemming says, "Hello, Dwight. Hello, Bernard."
So, hello.
Hello, Jason. Thanks
Hi.
for being with us. Like and share, 5-star reviews. If there is that, I don't know how that works on the outlets that we are streaming to. I think YouTube has that, but so make sure to log in each one. It ups the number. No, I'm just kidding. Thank you, Jason. It's a fascinating idea to get into with the music and how you are able to highlight that. And you hit upon one of the things that is my favorite thing about podcasting. One of my favorite things about podcasting is meeting people. Yeah. And it's funny because one of the things I have noticed is that when I have a podcast dedicated to something, that I'm able to reach out to people who are interesting to talk to. Yeah. And I feel like it sounds better to say, hey, I have a podcast. Would you like to come on? Than it is to say, hey, I'm some weirdo who just wants to talk to you. I found you on the internet. That probably doesn't go over quite as well. And I wouldn't have the guts to do it. So that's one thing I like about it.
I know that at least the person that I interviewed last the weekend actually deafed me out the first time because they thought it was like, I've got a podcast and I'd like to be on it. And they thought, oh yeah, right, yeah. How much money is that going to cost me?
So like it's a scam or something.
So it's like yeah. But I mean, I don't know if you're a musician, but I mean, I'm not constantly getting scammed for playlists and God knows, and everybody wants, everybody wants a piece of the action. And I think it's very easy. So I try and make at least contact. Kind of build up a little bit of a rapport with the guests, like via Instagram or one of the other channels that we have for submitting music. So you at least kind of say to somebody, I like your song, it's cool, and then try and get them on the podcast. Most people do, but some people don't. But
yeah, and some people, I invited a writer onto a podcast that I was doing about the writing process a while back, and she basically said she didn't like interviews at all. So I mean, there is that, and I always try to be conscious of that when reaching out, as you put it, even amongst podcasters or writers experience this, or different people online, where it's like someone comes on and says, hey. It's like the old scam. This was in the US, and maybe they still do it, but Who's Who, which was essentially this thing of like, your children have been selected to be in Who's Who. You just pay this fee. And it's like, all it was it just published people's names.
Yeah.
Jason made a comment here. He says, damn it, I always start with I'm a weirdo. Can I talk to you? So, there's different strategies and different ones work maybe differently or better than others.
Yeah.
But yeah, getting to meet people is one of the most exciting things there. And, it leads into, Jason also posted this question, which, and anybody, I see a few people are watching us too, please feel free. You can comment and we'll see it here and I'll try to do it correctly. But there's a question that I wanted to talk about too. I think you started talking about this of reaching out through Instagram or other maybe there's other formats. Where do you meet the musicians?
The first place I met, there was a platform called Submit Hub, which is kind of a scam. No, it's not really. It's basically a place where, as a musician, you can submit your music to curators of playlists or blogs or Instagram influencers who will use your song for their content. And it has kind of a back end where to get credits to do all of this, to be able to submit your music, you listen to other artists, you listen to other music and give them feedback. And in fact, I've stopped doing the curating, trying to push to curators, and pretty much I'm exclusively looking at new music, but before the podcast. And not only that, because there's a lot of there's a lot of great music out there. It's unbelievable. Independent musicians who are doing really high quality stuff.
That's what I wonder. Do you seek out new and indie musicians who wouldn't otherwise be getting attention?
Yes, yeah, definitely. Independent is the key word. somebody's. Well, I didn't realize that. I'm sorry, I'm a bit older than most people would be doing this sort of thing. Well, I had a song from Dua Lipa on that playlist, but I just liked the song, and I didn't know who Dua Lipa was. Like, she's like the second most streaming artist on Spotify. So I said it to somebody. I said, "Yeah, everybody on that list is independent," and they said, "So when are you going to get Dua Lipa on your podcast?" I'm like, Dua Lipa on my podcast? Where have I got a Dua Lipa song on my? But maybe for Dua Lipa, I would make a kind of an exception. If she wanted to come on the podcast, but it's primarily independent people who submit, who publish their own work, their own music.
Okay, and. Does that have you found, and I don't know if you do this or if you follow up, I've seen this on the way things work out, but do you see people who go through the indie stage that then wind up signing up or going corporate? No, I'm just kidding. Because a lot of people, if they get that opportunity, would do it, or is that more of a choice to say that they don't want to do that?
A lot of, I think a lot of bands who are coming up are definitely looking for that next level. It's easy to say. They're broadly kind of, there are people who just want to make their music and they just want to put it out into the world, and that's fine. They're just happy to get their music heard and fine. And there are other people who are looking for an audience, and whether that is, I think there's a very much a big trend in the independent artists for staying independent, and I think platforms like Spotify have made that possible. That you can do a lot of creation, putting your music out, publishing, promotion, without actually having to sign up to a big label, and it's possible to make a living out of it. In a way that I think 20 years ago was not possible.
It's really interesting to see the different routes that are there, as you just put that, right? To be able to be independent and still potentially have that work into something. And you see that lend itself towards other especially the arts, I think. And you even see industries built around that, like Patreon or different things, or even people developing their own. And then you see the other, which, oh gosh, I didn't, research this, but there's the guy who just got a music deal, the sea shanty guy on Instagram. Does everybody know what I'm talking about? The guy who popularized, and then people are adding on to with instruments and such. Anyway, I didn't have his, I don't want to look it up now. I'll get distracted. But so, you see kind of it both social media giving people a boost to get known when they would never get seen for either their own independent career, or sometimes maybe that's where they get noticed by talent scouts or whatever they're called.
Well, I think that's the thing, it's the gatekeepers are different, I think when I was young, trying to make it as a musician, you had to go to a label and do a demo, and if they said no, we don't like the look of you don't like your sound, then that's it. And now a lot of these the big artists are blowing up because they're big on social media, and then they're kind of picked up because they're already quite big. They've already made.
That's fascinating to be able to go and say, I have an audience already. Right. To have that, or even maybe it draws attention to say, oh, there's 50 bajillion views, which all of us in podcasting are familiar with those numbers.
Every week.
It's because you got that sea shanty guy coming on.
Exactly.
We'll have him here next week. But and it's really bridged a gap in a way, like you say, and that's fascinating. Can you tell everybody a little bit about your own history with music? Like, when did you get into it? What do you play? That kind of thing.
I got into music. I think I've always been into music. When I was very young, I learned to play the bagpipes.
Nice.
The Highland bagpipes. That was a very long time ago. I don't do it anymore.
Huh.
Is
it like riding a bike? Could you pick one up now?
No. It's really, really hard. Well,
it
not only
like
that, because you have to learn to play the chanter, which is like the pipe itself, and then you have to learn to breathe in a different way. You have to learn this kind of cyclic breathing where you're breathing in, and then you're holding breath in your throat, which you use to fill the bagpipes.
Wow. Okay.
So it's like playing a didgeridoo. You're constantly breathing, but you're actually not. You're not using your breath to. You're not using the breath to play the note. You're using the breath to fill your mouth with air that you then blow out.
So right away, you're doing a thing at a very young age that already sounds impossible to me.
But it was impossible as well at the time.
Very cool, though. Very cool.
It was very cool, but I kind of gave that up after a while. There wasn't any future in it.
You weren't going to be one of the greats that get out your album.
No. It was more nostalgia than anything else. And then I moved more into singing and choirs, and I went through a period of barbershop quartet.
Really? Oh,
yeah,
cool.
Yeah. Singing a lot a cappella. I think I did that for about 5 or 6 years. We were in a quartet.
Wow.
We weren't bad. We were okay. We weren't, we're in the top 30 in the UK, but that's pretty easy.
Is it? Okay. I mean, once again, I wouldn't know. It sounds impressive to me.
Yeah, it sounds impressive to me as well. But
are you one of these? Are you one of these artists who undersells your own skills?
No, I'm really overselling. Nah, we were okay. We were kind of in the middle range. We weren't ever going to win anything, but we weren't the worst. We were okay. And somewhere along the way, I learned to play guitar, and that's really been my instrument of choice for my whole career, over the rest of my life. And then did some busking and went around Europe for a couple of months, busking on the streets and trying to pay my way, and decided to get a real job.
What did you go into?
Metallurgy, material science, metallurgy, I think you would say in America. So I work in the steel industry. So I developed new different types of steel. For cars. Yeah.
So you like that? I mean, this is a semi-public forum, so what are you going to say? But
first of all, it's okay. It pays the bill. No, it's more than it pays the bills. I've enjoyed it. Most of my life. It's pretty. Yeah.
Would you say there's a creative element to that?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. Somebody comes up with a problem, and they say, well, we need a certain type of material that will do a certain type of thing, and within the thing that makes it super creative, and that's with anything, is it has a lot of limitations. I work with a particular material. So within the limitations of that material, and that's the same with music as well, within the limitations of what you have, you can be very creative.
So you're having to kind of engineer your way around those problems that presents.
Yeah, exactly. Or you have to think of something that will work. And certainly in a lot of cases, if I go to the metallurgy part, there are products that require different properties. So let's say I'm going completely away from the podcast here, by the way. Just
this is the new one you and I are starting, which is
the funny thing is the one that we just went out on Monday. I had this whole discussion about metallurgy with him as well. It's like, but that's not what it was about. But anyway, I mean, if you've got let's say the front of a car, it needs to be shaped into a certain shape to make it look nice in the car, but it also has to have some kind of residual ability to be deformed if you hit something. And those two things, so there's a kind of a contest between it being strong enough to take the impact of a crash, but also to be sort of stretchable enough for it to be made into a specific shape. And those two things they're not very easy to make a compromise of, to put into one material. So as the strength goes up, the stretchability goes down. So trying to find a balance, and that's the same as in music, or in any creative endeavor.
Yeah,
it's the same as any creative endeavor. You have a particular set of parameters or limitations. If you're a painter, you've got a canvas of a certain size. You use oils, or you use water or ink, and all of those things have a different, or chalk or whatever, and they all have their own limitations and their own qualities. And how do you produce something within that limitation, within those parameters, that is new and creative, that is new and interesting?
Yeah. And at the same time, there's also the utilitarian piece, I imagine, of like people will want, there's an aesthetic to the car, but there's an aesthetic to the, not just, you can't see music, but there is a brand of presentation too, isn't there?
Yeah.
And performance and things like that too. And not just like seeking after a contract or something, but engaging with your audience and that as well, huh?
Yeah.
So that's very interesting. I was just thinking, as you were talking about the metallurgic creativity, I was thinking, I wonder if that's like, and then you said it, right? That there is that element of that creativity. So you're, really an artist all the way around is what you're saying.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. I think, I would say I'm a creative person, and that's not just in one field. That's also in accountants. Oh, sorry,
my taxes.
My taxes are really. I'm really creative about my taxes. No, but
the secrets,
there's in anything, and I think that's also what led me into doing the podcast as well. Is kind of an outlet for a creative urge.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. You talk about limitations. Like for me with podcasting, I'm my own laziness in editing. That's one I've had to work around. Right.
Yeah.
Or whatever there is and stuff. One of the things that strikes me too is limitations that we overcome by learning and things. Sound quality and sound engineering must have been you had to step up on that with having the musical, at least I imagine that would translate, that skill set would translate to the audio.
Yeah. It makes you more conscious of quality, what works well and what doesn't work well, and balance as well. But I still had to learn a lot of it's not the same.
Mm-hmm.
Doing a podcast and producing music, but there are a lot of skills that are crossover indeed.
Mm-hmm.
But I still had to learn a lot of things, and that things like editing. See, when we record a piece of music, what I'll do is, let's say I have a piece of music that's 3.5 minutes long, and there are different guitar parts in that. I'm not going to play 3.5 minutes long. There's no way. There's almost no player in the world good enough to play that long and not make a single mistake. And when you're recording, with live, it's not a problem. But when you're recording, then you want it to be as good as it can get. So you break it up into small pieces, and you record those.
And that's part of the art, really.
And that's part of the art.
Is the post production, right?
Yeah, but in a podcast, you're talking to somebody. The interaction is more important, and and then afterwards you've got all the ums and ers and picking my nose and breathing too heavy or whatever,
Well, and there's different philosophies there too,
Yeah.
because and I would say there's a balance where if you have a series of pause for a long time, you're gonna address that. Usually, I think most podcasters do. And then there's also the flow. And I've noticed that there have been times where I'm experimenting with editing and I take out some ums, and then it sounds like, just sounds really choppy, basically. And that's when I went to the next one, and it's like that doesn't flow, So keeping that in sometimes is
have good. To get really good at crossfading.
Yeah, exactly. I've done a little bit of that, and sometimes it's successful. Let me bring up now. This is Jason's post, and he says, "Sorry for the long post." And by the way, this is Vern. So I don't know if Vern's using Jason. Maybe Jason is Vern. Maybe I don't know him well enough to say it's a secret identity. Oh yeah, Vern from the Cinema Recall podcast. He was going to be here with us today, but then he broke his mic. Yeah, I understand that he made a really good point and dropped his mic, and that's why it broke, I think. Anyway, he was on stage somewhere. I don't know, hip hop. I'm going to create a whole backstory for Vern. You said, what is the sea shanty craze? It's a thing on Instagram. I don't want to get too lost in it because I'm not an expert, but it was brought up by a guy, and so people are experimenting with sea shanties, which is kind of cool. Bernard, you have tons of different musicians, different genres. Are you at a point now where musicians contact you, or do you still need to reach out to them? And then there's a follow-up question. If there was one artist you'd like to interview, who would that be? I'm going to take that down so we can see us, but let's, if you will, let's go with that first question first. Have you reached a point where do you get people who reach out to you?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Fortunately, the people that have reached out to me have mostly liked their stuff, or at least I can. I think that's the thing with having the podcast is I listen to the music in a different way. Not all of the music that is on the podcast is stuff that I maybe would listen to. Most of it. I mean, it's the idea is my new favorite song. It's my songs that I actually like. There's nothing on there that I couldn't listen. There's nothing on there that I think I could not listen to this. So everything, that's the kind of the criteria I have is, can I listen to it? Do I like it? But the more you listen to it, the more it's possible to actually find something valuable in all of it.
So even if it's not your thing, you can appreciate something about it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And there's one episode where I kind of got the idea that wasn't something that I would really listen to very often. But I thought there's something intriguing about it. And I really wanted to get to know what was going on behind the scenes. And I had contact with that person on Submit Hub because I gave them some feedback. I said, well, I can't hear the lyrics. So that they went back and spent like 12. It happened to be somebody with OCD. It's like, I've got to go back. So he's like,
you didn't know what you were starting.
I just said, it sounds okay, but I can't hear the vocals. And he went away and spent like a day remixing the whole song and sent it back to me. And I'm like, all right, okay. I'll have another listen to it. Sounds good. And then, one thing led to another. But I do get people who a couple of people that have already been on the podcast have reached out to me, and then I kind of go through their catalog and think, okay, I like that song more than that song. So if I'm going to speak to them, I'm going to speak to them about that song because that's the one I like. So it's very rare that you have somebody who reaches out to you and has something that I can't like.
Right.
So very long
that goes along. It goes along with the creativity piece too, I think. And one of the things I've noticed is in doing interviews, which I've done a lot of those over the years, is that there's it kind of and with my career working with people in a human services capacity, is that there's almost nothing or no one that is not interesting, right? And I say almost, I say almost, but it's probably true for everyone. if you can key into that person and you find sort of a trace of either empathy, or you find a trace of something you can identify with, or something that moves you if you look hard enough. And that's very interesting that you say that.
Yeah, I mean, my original premise for when I first started, there's an excellent podcast, and if you've got if you like music, then I would absolutely 100% recommend it. You should actually reach out to Kirk Hamilton of Strong Songs podcast, and what he does is he takes very well-known songs, and what he calls them strong songs. Stuff from the Beatles, stuff from every, and also from people that are less well known, but mostly very famous songs, and he takes them apart bit by bit and shows the build up. And he plays all the stuff himself. He's an excellent musician, plays all the pieces himself and puts it all together. So that was kind of my idea, to do something like that instead of like for the most popular songs, but for indie stuff. But actually, in the end, I found that that's not really my thing, and I found it much more interesting to talk to people about what it is. So it's become less of about kind of a strong songs for indie, more than what's behind the person behind it, what created, what motivated somebody to write that song or to become an artist. And I find that personally more my thing.
And I would say that that's also, for me, as a non-musician, that seems to have a much broader appeal, because I probably would have a limit on how much I would listen to something that's all about song structure and those things. But yet, hearing the stories, I love stories and storytelling, and so that helps me get into it as both a fan of music, but also a fan of stories, right? Telling. Yeah, I think that's excellent.
I mean, I think I always remember when I first really got into music, and I also I think it was albums of like Bob Dylan, stuff like Neil Young, and I'm like, oh, wouldn't it be great if there was like a book I could read where they said, this is what this song means to me, and this is what, it probably is now, but when we're talking about the 80s, early mid 80s, it didn't have that kind of involvement or interaction with big stars or with musicians. And so it's always kind of stuck with me. It's like, what's going on? Somebody wrote this song, and what's behind it? What's behind the song? What does it mean to them? What does it mean what are they trying to tell? What are they trying to share with everybody?
Do you have a thought about a time where you had a story or an event or emotion behind something that you composed that you would share with us, perhaps, if there's something that comes up?
There's the song that we recorded it for our EP, which came out last May, and in fact we've just remixed this song, so it's going to be coming out again as a single, and the song is called Forever, and I wrote that song for my son, who is now 15 nearly, and what I thought was, at some point, if you're a parent, I don't know if you're a parent yourself, but at some point you look at your kids, and there's going to be a kind of time in their life when they move on. They leave.
I have a 17-year-old.
Exactly. So you're right at that point. Right. So this song is basically, it's about knowing that you have to let that person go out into the world. The chorus is, you've got to make your own mistakes. I can't live your life for you. You've got to make your own mistakes. But at the same time, it's like, they're still your kid. They're still your child. They're still, and you still want to keep them small and keep them with you. So there's this real struggle at being a parent, of letting go but not wanting to let go.
I have like a visceral, like a reaction when you were talking about that, the lyric, right, to make your own mistakes. And it was interesting because the maybe deeper reaction that I have is, appreciation for watching my kids become who they are.
Yeah.
Got one very young and 2 teenagers, and see it's fascinating to see them become who they are. And there's that deep appreciation. But my first gut reaction is fear, right? Is like, oh yeah, they have to make their own. I don't want them to make mistakes. I don't want them to get hurt. I do deep down, but I don't, you know what I mean? Yeah. There's that.
I mean, you know, I remember when I left home to go to university, and my dad said to me, I remember this was one of the probably the only time that he ever really said anything to me that showed me that he actually felt anything more for me than an extra mouth to feed. And he said, well, you know, it's your life. It's like, well, I've got my life, you know, whatever you do, that's your life, you know, but whatever happens, we're here, you know, fall flat on your face, you know where you can come back to.
Wow.
You know, it's like, but it's your life. I'm not going to tell you how to live it. I'm not, you know, and if you do something stupid and you fall flat on your face, it's your own problem. But we'll always be here to support you. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of how I feel as a parent. It's like, yeah, there's obviously the point that you just said, I don't want him to fall flat on his face, you know, but in the end, it's his life. It's not my life, you know?
Yeah.
And there's this beautiful poem from Khalil Gibran. Your children are not your children. You know, they are the arrow and you are the bow. And they will fly forwards and you will be left behind.
Yeah.
And you are the bow that propels them, but they are the arrow that flies.
That's a really beautiful way to look at it too. So you were able to bring that sentiment into not only, well, it's not your relationship with your son, but also the spirit of that into the song.
Into the song as well.
Yeah. To give that, it's a powerful mentality. And I'm like you too. I don't, I know people who seem to be like, oh, when they're, I'm going to kick you out and become independent, blah, blah, blah. And I had a similar statement my dad made to me at some point in young adulthood of, you always have a home to come back to. And I have that feeling too of how could you not be there in that way for your kid? And so that's powerful. And I guess that must relate into how you interview composers, how you interview artists.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there is a natural sympathy.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the most important thing is curiosity. I'm really curious,
Mm-hmm.
I'm really interested when I listen to a song and I hear something and I think, oh, that's a cool lyric, or well, what happened there? Why? Or it makes me feel a certain way. And then it's interesting.
I think that
to find out what it is that created that.
We all seek to be relevant in our lives, I think, and we all seek to be interesting in a way. But I think even more important is focusing on being interested in the world around us. And I think that's what makes life, really worth living too. We have a comment from Bill Revel, and any relation to Chris Revel? I don't know, as I don't know him, but community radio will give you also non-algorithm based music choices as opposed to the commercial end of the dial. More of a statement than a question, but what's your thoughts about that?
Yeah, definitely. Well, the nice thing is about certainly local. I live in the Netherlands, so radio here is slightly different. I think in America there's quite a lot of. You have this college radio, community radio. The radio stations are a lot different. I have once been interviewed on a radio station in the United States.
Okay.
Just in Sholo, Arizona, just for the record.
Okay. Shout out to Sholo.
Shout out to Sholo. That was a very long time ago. Nobody will ever remember it. I don't think anybody was listening. But anyway.
Anybody out there, if anybody out there has the audio, send it to us.
That would be cool. But anyway, we have a lot of local radio stations. So you have, but there are a lot of local bands play on these local radio stations. So exactly what you said. So you have, this alternative to, if you listen to the main radio stations, you just hear the same bands churning out the same kind of songs because they're popular, or they do well on the radio, and they do well on the radio because they do well on the radio. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're popular because they're popular. They're popular because they're on the radio, or on the radio because they're popular. So it's just kind of this cycle of.
That's interesting. You know? It's a
self-perpetuating cycle. Yeah.
No, that's very interesting. And because one of the keys of popularity is people have heard it. And one of the things about independent art is that people, haven't consumed it as much. And that's really the only reason why certain things are not popular. Yeah.
So what I say is go and listen to the Enrons forever 10 times and you will love it. Huh. I mean, you'll love it the first time, but listen to it 10 times, and it'll be like your favorite song ever.
That's
how it works. That's how it works.
I'm gonna. You said the Enrons.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's interesting because that's ties into.
That's my band, by the way. Just so.
Okay, I was gonna ask you that. Okay, I was wondering. Spell that Enron, E-N-R-O-N.
E-N-N-R-O-N. They're not. Nah, there is another Enron, but that's not the one.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's not
but it's it's a play on my it's a play on our own name. So my surname is Ennis with E-double-N, and my compatriot is called Ron, so we called ourselves the Enrons.
Very nice.
And also with the knowledge in my head of Enron being this financial, so it kind of has a bit of a name. It's kind of a bit of it's already well known.
Counterculture too, right? I mean,
yeah.
Art isn't art about that a little bit.
Yeah. So it's kind of like, I know it's not something that people are completely unfamiliar with. They'll have heard the sound Enron. Oh, I've heard that name. So it's kind of.
All right. Anyway, I'm gonna find it. 10 times you said, so I got that.
Seven times apparently you should. 7 times you need to hear something before it becomes anchored into your mind.
Oh, very interesting. One of the things I wanted to ask you, and so you've partially answered this with the Enrons, but and I'm going to take the second part of Jason's question, or rather Vern's question. He asked if there's one artist you'd like to interview, who would it be? I'm going to tweak that just a little and say, first of all, who should we be listening to? Who would you suggest? Somebody that we don't know.
Right. Well, there are a couple of people that you will never have heard of that you should be listening to. One of them, there's a band called Telco, Telco. Excellent. Been on the podcast, episode 4. Brilliant. Left his job as a day trader to become a musician. He's doing really well. Another person, if you like, a bit more kind of singer-songwriter, is there are two. There's a guy called Simon Mitlid, S-I-M-E-N, Mitlid. He's Norwegian. And another guy called Jack Woodlawn, J-A-K Woodlawn. So they're absolutely phenomenal singer-songwriters, beautiful music. And if you're a bit more into the heavier end, then Tidal Wave, German guy who's just on last week, and a bit more rocky is Peace in the City Grease. I can just go on forever and ever. Go to the podcast.
I was going to say,
really great podcast. There's this really great podcast, right? It's called Your New Favorite Song Podcast. And every week, there's not only about a new artist, but they also recommend other artists, songs that they like.
Oh, very good. Yeah. So then
that's the very end.
Grows your awareness, right?
So at the very end, they always recommend something that they're listening to.
Yeah. Jason, another post from Jason here where he said, there you go, the enrons.com/podcast/episode/CCO. So anyway,
whatever.
I'll let people see that there in the show notes. I don't know if Chris puts up show notes, but we'll see. Chris or Bree might do that. Either way, but go there. And I'm assuming all the different like podcatchers, we find you on Apple, Spotify, that kind of business. Yeah.
Everywhere. Yeah.
Okay. And the name of the podcast is your
new favorite song.
Your new
favorite in the English, the proper way of spelling it.
There's a U in there.
There's a U in it. Yeah.
It puts the U in favorite. And how do people contact you if people would like to reach out to you? Is it just through the website or?
through the website. We're on Instagram. We're on Facebook.
Under Enrons?
The Enrons. Or also YNFS, your new favorite song. Podcast is also on
YNFS. Gotcha. Okay.
Podcast. YNFS podcast.
Okay. Great.
It's on all the Twitter, Instagram, whatever, everywhere.
Wonderful. Well, it's just such a fascinating show. I'm excited to listen to it. And one thing I always like to point out to people is if you like the show, if you like what we're doing here, make sure that you go on to your next favorite song podcast and rate and review it. Make sure that you're doing that. There are algorithms that, funny enough, as anti-algorithm as our messages today, that will actually put it up and suggest it for people more. More importantly, to be philosophically consistent, I guess, share it directly with people.
Well, that's the thing. I prefer if you like an episode and a song that you share that episode and a song with somebody else. You think, you might like this song, which is the premise of the whole podcast, is for somebody to find something that they think, this is a cool song that I would not normally have heard through my algorithm on Spotify or wherever.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you so much, not just for being here today, but thank you for what you're doing, because you're not only creating art, you're an artist and a patron of the arts at the same time by boosting awareness. And is there a way, by the way, do you have anything set up as far as support for either your band or for your podcast? Is there Patreon or anything?
We're on Patreon. We kind of do both through patreon.com, the Enrons.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to support the podcast, you can go onto their Patreon and do it through there. There's also a site called Buy Me a Coffee, which is on the podcast.
Yes. Gaining popularity for podcasts.
Which means you can just pay through like $3 or €3, whatever it is. Just buy me a cup of coffee is essentially the price of a cup of coffee once. You don't have to pay every month and stuff like that. So
and that's a nice alternative for the Patreon too. It's a tough thing to set up. I'm setting that up for one of my shows now. Jason, once again, saying it was nice watching this with you. We got a couple of likes and hearts and shares.
Very nice being here.
And I know that people usually go around. Bree posts this different places, and we usually get a lot of views after the fact too. So make sure to patronize that. YNFS stands for your new favorite song. That's why that's your Instagram. I just realized that. So maybe because I'm kind of a dummy. I was like, does that stand for not safe for work? What does that stand for?
You're not fucking sane.
Oh man. All right. Well, make sure everybody to watch the Let's Chat Facebook group as well. Same place that you heard about this broadcast, to watch as we interview more fascinating shows. And remember to join us for Let's Chat Live, so we can Let's Chat Live. That's a new tagline that I just thought of, and we'll see if Chris likes it enough to. Bree will edit that out. All right.
Okay.
Thank you again, Bernard. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Yeah, you too. Thanks very much for having me.